Is Lynn there yet? I see Lynn. Do we have Lynn?
Yep, she's on.
All right. Should we wait a couple of minutes, see if anyone else is going to jump on?
Yeah, I think let's wait a minute or two.
Do the attendees need to write in Q&A or in chat with questions, or are they allowed to speak? Do you guys know?
I think we have done in the past where they can write in.
Okay.
Yeah.
In
I
the
think in the Q&A is where you'll write questions.
Okay. Yep, there we go. All right, Lynn, I see that. Thanks.
Oh, you got it. Okay, perfect.
Cool.
That's why. Okay, well, we know that's working. That's good.
Hey, did you guys get a ton of snow up in Boulder this morning?
I got
It was-
quite a bit in Brookville.
Crazy. Like it came out of nowhere.
I know,
for
it's
like an
wild.
hour and a half, and then it was all gone.
Yeah.
It was funny. We were looking at the phone. Ron was asking me what the temperature was going to be today, and I was like, "Well, it's going to start snowing in about 20 minutes." Sure enough, that was like clockwork.
Yeah, we had big, giant snowflakes. Like it was unreal. It was really pretty for about 20 minutes. But I'm over the snow, so done with it.
Ready for spring.
Yes.
Time.
Okay, well, I think we can go ahead and get started.
Okay.
All right, well, thank you everyone for joining. Those of you that are on Facebook Live joining us, and then also on the webinar as well. My name is Lydia Creasy, and I am the team lead for Lydia's home team. The other awesome agents on our team are Sherry Brown and Jim Dixon. And then we also have Alyssa Solana, who is like really the glue of everything, who's going to be guiding us through all the slides tonight and who has set up the whole presentation. So that's amazing. And then we're also going to be joined by Karla Kyte and Kelsey Arietta, and they work with Cross Country Mortgage. They specialize in working with a lot of clients before, during, and after divorce, but they also do a lot as far as creative financing, and really are experts as far as like helping you guys figure out whether it's better to buy or rent. So it's going to be a great presentation, and we'll kind of get started with that. And then we will definitely have plenty of time at the end that we can chat about questions as well. All right, so just to give you guys an overview of what we're going to be discussing tonight, we will talk a lot about offer negotiations and how to make your offer appealing as we get into that busier market. And also now it is starting to really ramp up, but we're seeing a lot of success with offers that we are writing as far as some great things that we can be putting in there for our clients as well. Kelsey and Karla will be talking quite a bit about buy versus rent scenarios. So a lot of times, this whole webinar is really kind of geared for maybe someone where it's not just like a slam dunk, like I can just go out and get a loan. Maybe there's a hiccup along the way, you're getting divorced, or you've had a death in the family, or you have some credit that you need to repair. So this is really geared towards people who are trying to get past a hurdle first in order to buy a home. And we just have some great creative tools for that. So we'll be going over that as well. Another big thing that we see right now is people that really do want to buy, but they need to sell first. And so what does that look like? Does it mean that you have to make a double move? Do you have to sell first? Can you make an offer non-contingent? And if so, how can you do that? So we'll be talking on that as well. And then we will discuss various financing options. That'll be a little bit more Kelsey and Karla again. And then we will be talking about some different ways that you are going to be enabled to buy before you sell if you choose to. And then next we'll be talking a lot about just divorce in real estate. And this is a super eye-opening topic. I know Karla had made a point in a class that I went to as far as, what was it, 9,000 divorces are expected in 2024?
That's only in the Denver metro, 17,000 statewide and almost 1 million nationwide.
So that's a crazy statistic. But one thing that I really love about Karla and her team is just that they are really focused on making sure that both people in that divorce are taken care of and creating an equal home for kids if they're involved, but just to make it a really like a win-win, a success for everyone. So, and then we will also be talking about accessing equity in the marital home, or it could just be in the current home, just kind of depending on what you're looking to do. So there are some ideas around that as well. So lots of good information. We will move on to the next piece as well. So when we get to the point where you're working with Jim, Sherry, or I, as far as the offer goes, there's several different things that go into how we make that offer competitive. So obviously price is one of the first things that we are going to be, looking through comparable sales, talking about the market, talking about that specific area to make sure that that price that we are offering is competitive, and that's going to set you up for success. We will also talk about the financing. So kind of along with that, like if you do have a home to sell, or if there's some hiccups along the way, we're going to be doing our homework to make sure that those are really covered already before we get to that offer process, so that as soon as the seller accepts your offer, we're really smooth sailing to get to the closing table. We will talk a lot about contingencies as well. Those contingencies a lot of times are with the sale of the home, but there also are contingencies that we need to talk about with regard to the appraisal and the inspection as well. We will discuss a little bit as far as flexibility and occupancy. So sometimes it could make your offer even better if you are flexible in the occupancy, and there's a couple different ways that we can do that. Not as pertinent right now, but it might be something that comes back to the table here in the next couple of months. And then obviously communication and transparency. Our goal is to make everything as smooth as possible in that offer process through the inspection and also through all of the financing as well. So again, kind of going back to the pricing, we will talk a lot about the market conditions. So one of the awesome things that is helpful for us is being on the team where we can work all across the Front Range, but every neighborhood is so different, and every price point is so different. So really assessing the market conditions for that specific area are super important as you're preparing an offer and looking for a home. We also, we aren't seeing as much of this right now, but in the past we have seen bigger gaps with the appraisals that are coming in right now. We are seeing them come in really true to the contract price. So that's been helpful. But if there are issues there, we have some tools and tricks to get past those as well. And then I think we've kind of talked about the other things. Well, before we kind of move on to Sherry, I think it was next. If anybody has questions, you can pop them in the chat box too. Okay, well, we'll jump to Sherry. Sherry is one of my right-hand woman. She'll be walking us through the next couple of slides, so
So the
enjoy.
Thanks, Lyd. So the one thing that you have to understand is it's not, when we're working with a seller, if we're on the buy side and we're working with a seller, and trying to make our offer look attractive, it really is going to depend on those market scenarios that Lydia was talking about. So right now, the last few months, it's been a little quieter. So, we're able to ask for a little bit more. When it gets revved up here, which the anticipation is over the next few months, we'll start seeing some possibly multiple offers again. I have actually started seeing them. I know I talked to Kelsey earlier today, who's on the call, that she saw one pretty big jump as far as multi-offers. So I think we'll be seeing that again, but it's not just always about the price, and that's where we get creative. And those negotiations or those contingencies, let me go back for just a second and kind of talk about what a contingency is. A contingency is in a contract where you get to kind of kick the tires on the home. So it is contingent upon maybe selling your home, which an existing property. That's probably the biggest one that people think of when we say contingencies. But it's also, we could make it contingent on a home inspection. And Colorado is wonderful with our contracts. It is very buyer focused. It protects the buyer in so many ways. But you have the ability to negotiate those contingencies. So a home inspection, you can, if it's really getting into a multi-offer situation, we've seen people say, okay, I'm not going to ask for anything else. I will take it as is, but I still want the opportunity to terminate if the house isn't, where I want it to be, or there's too much going on and there's too much to fix. So we can do it that way. We can do it where, the typical way of just saying, okay, they really like the house, but it needs a new furnace. Are you willing to buy a new furnace? So there's all sorts of places that we can get creative on the inspection process when we're trying, when we're working with the seller. We start, like I said, playing with these a little bit more when the market is hot, and keep them in and keep them as buyer focused as they are when we are a little slower. So that's why it's so important to know what the market is doing. The appraisal piece is another part where we can get into contingencies, and this is where home prices start to jump up. Back in 2020, beginning of last year and 2022, what we were seeing was people just going wild with their offers. So say something was appraised or listed at 600,000. Most likely those houses were being multi-offers were going to 800,000 or more, which is absolutely why the market prices ramped up as much as they did. We have not seen them go back down. So if that's a question for you, we really haven't seen them go down. We've seen them stay pretty flat from where they peaked. But that's how that occurred. We have very few homes for inventory, and people like to overbid. I'm going to let Kelsey quickly speak to what happens if it doesn't appraise, or if we talk about waiving the appraisal from, maybe we say your list price was $625. Your appraisal was $625. We're offering $675. What happens to that $50,000? So Kelsey, do you want to chime in real quick on that?
Yeah, certainly. So on the lending side, and as lenders, we really have to lend on the lesser of the appraised value or the purchase price. So in that scenario, if you're under contract at 675 and the appraisal, let's say it was listed at 600, but the appraisal came in at 625, it covered part of that potential gap between the appraised value and the purchase price, but not all of it. And so we have to go based off of that 625 where the appraisal came in. So really it's up to you to cover that gap of 50,000. Now, if you are waiving your appraisal contingency, there's a couple ways that is looked at, where in some cases, depending on your down payment, depending on the property and a few other factors, we as lenders could actually get what's called an appraisal waiver, where we don't even need to get an appraisal. The loan can be done without that. And the appraisal is really for us as the lender to know where that, opinion of value is coming in at. So that's super awesome. But there are some cases we don't get that and you still have to get an appraisal, but you might still be waiving your appraisal contingency. So what that means is if that appraisal comes in low, that you are willing to cover that difference. Now, we can get really creative on the lending side and we can look at some options as to, what can we do if there's this $50,000 appraisal gap and you're putting 20% down on that property. We can maybe lower your down payment by 50,000 and you don't have to come to the table with any more money out of pocket, even though you're purchasing that home for 50,000 more than the appraised value. There's some other kind of creative ways. I won't jump into everything, but we can really work with you on the lending side to help try to navigate what that would look like if an appraisal gap comes into play and if that's something that you need to consider putting into your offers.
Yeah, and also just one thing too, as far as the flip side of that, like right now, when we're pricing listings to go on the market, we're looking at comparables that have sold, mainly between October, November, December, and this first part of the year. So, traditionally it's always a little bit slower coming up to the holidays. And then also like in this last year, we were seeing rates in the 8% range for that fall timeframe. So, it's also possible it could work in your favor the other way, so that maybe the appraisal does come in low, but we can negotiate the sales price down based on that. Same with the inspection. I mean, lately we've been seeing some great success stories with inspections where, pretty much everything is getting addressed as far as what the buyer is asking for within reason. So it can, we're talking about it in one mindset, but it certainly can work the other way too.
Agreed. Yeah. In fact, I just had one last 2 weeks ago that we asked for 5 or 6 different things in the inspection objection, including a new water heater. The balcony was going to fall over, so we had that fixed. A new garbage disposal. We had 4 or 5 different things addressed, and they took care of everything, and they took care of it before we closed. So that was super nice for the buyer. So when it's quieter, those are those contingencies that we can really push on. And again, in that same case, her appraisal, it came in a lot higher because than we bought it for, she bought it for. So all good things, and you can just kind of watch the market, which is why a lot of times you hear us saying, even though inventory might be low and interest rates might be high, sometimes it's just better to go when you find that right house and not worry about the interest rates, because that can be, there's conversations there as well. One thing that we've been doing a lot of, and we're not talking about this specifically on this particular webinar, but we have done 2-1 buy downs and been able to negotiate that into offers when it's a little quieter. And sometimes the seller would much rather help you with your interest rate than lower the price of the house. So all sorts of things to think about with your agent when we get to that, find that perfect house for you.
Really quick, there was a question about what I was explaining. So I just want to answer that really quick to clarify that. So the scenario that I said, so if the home was listed at 600,000, but maybe due to multiple offers, it ended up that you go under contract on the house at 675,000, so above the list price. And if that appraisal comes in below that contract price that you are under contract at, that is where you are responsible for covering that gap as the buyer. And again, we can get creative with that, or it can be negotiated with the seller where that price would come down to the appraised value. So it can kind of go one of 2 directions, like Lydia mentioned as well. But if the appraisal contingency was waived and you guys are moving forward with that 675 price, but the appraisal came in lower, then that's where that appraisal gap comes into play. I hope that answers your question, but let me know if not.
Yeah, it can work either way, Lynn. It depends on, again, what you did on your offer. So when we're talking about a contingency, if you waive the contingency, if the appraisal doesn't come in, that's where that gap, then you owe the money. If you did not waive that appraisal and it comes in low, then we're back to the negotiation table to see if we can get the seller to lower it. And if they don't lower it, then you have the option of terminating the contract.
And also just to be clear too, it doesn't necessarily mean that gap happens in all cash. I mean, there's different ways that that can be resolved. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to bring, you know, that full amount in appraisal gap money. Like Kelsey said, you can change the structure of the loan. We can renegotiate things. There's some different tools and tricks. So definitely don't be thinking that you need that full amount. I mean, every situation is unique, so we can certainly chat through that as well.
Yeah, every situation, it'll make more sense when you get there or when we're actually writing an offer up. It can get explained much better. So this is just so you know that there are some other things that we can get creative with when we're negotiating on offers. It's not just about the price. Melissa, you want to next slide it? Great. So communication, because of all of those things, the communication and the transparency is really important. Both the seller and the buyer, if we can get them to communicate well, sometimes seller, if we're on the buy side, the seller sometimes doesn't communicate incredibly well or vice versa. So we're hoping to find that beautiful mix of everybody talking and wanting to come to a conclusion on what they need so that everybody's concerns and their needs are met. Sometimes it's, like I said, it might be price. Sometimes it might be inspection items. So really making sure that your needs are communicated to your agent is so, so important.
All right. So now we're gonna talk about probably the last date when you find a house and we put in a contract and we go over the contract with you. There's a big series of dates, takes up like a good amount of a page. And the last date on there, you got closing, and then you got the date of possession or occupancy. So basically, if you're in, you know, most are usually written for about a 30-day close, and most of the time, the closing date is the same as the date of possession. A lot of times the sellers needs more time to either find a replacement home or they're moving out of state, so they need more time to get ready, or a variety of different options. But basically they'll put in the notes that the brokers see in the listing sometimes that, you know, the buyers would, or the sellers would prefer 30 days or 60 days for possession after closing. So basically during that time, you're kind of a landlord if you're the buyer. But these, I mean, this is just a point that could make or break a deal if there's multiple offers. If the house is listed at 500,000 and they have an offer at 510,000, but the people want possession, you know, right at closing. Whereas we can come in maybe a little bit lower and say, hey, we'll give you, you know, 30 days or 60 days, you know, if the buyer's not in a hurry to move in right away. That way it's, you know, something that's more favorable to the sellers, and they'll say, I'd rather, you know, not be stressed to move or have to move twice or anything like that. So that possession date is definitely, you know, a point of conversation with the other side to see what would work best with them. That could make your offer more favorable than somebody else, even if it is at a lower price. A lot of times you'll hear it called a rent back period when the market was super crazy. People were getting 60 days post closing occupancy is the official term for that. And sellers were getting 60 days without having to pay any rent. So basically they get to stay in their own home, not pay any rent to the buyer for 2 months, because that's what it was taken to, you know, get your offer accepted as a buyer during that time. Right now, things are, you know, not as competitive as they were at that point. So we're not seeing this too often, but it is still something that, you know, even if it's 2 weeks after closing that people want, so they don't have to rush to move. It's just those little things that might make your offer stand out above somebody else's. So that's what the flexibility and occupancy refers to. And then probably the biggest part of your purchase contract and getting everything all squared away, so you have your ducks in a row to go to closing, is everything to do with your financing. So if somebody's paying cash for a house, there's two contingency parts of the contract that aren't even a deal breaker at that point, because the cash is, you know, usually you can close in 2 weeks. And that's that. You don't have to go through the loan process and everything, appraisals, all that stuff. With having a mortgage, which Kelsey and Karla will go over this in more detail. You know, there's two different dates in the contract that refer to your loan. There's the loan conditions, which basically is your interest rate, you know, what you have to put down to get your loan, just the conditions that you have to meet. And that date's usually, you know, pretty close to when you write your contract, just to say, hey, I'm happy with the loan that's being offered to me. And then the very last date, which is usually the last contingency in the contract period, is the loan availability, meaning you didn't get fired from your job or anything like that. You still qualify for your loan. Your loan is still available to you at the conditions that you agreed to. So those are the two contingencies that go along with the financing through that time. So a lot of times you'll hear, if there's multiple offers on a house, if we're going up against a cash offer, some people always say cash is always king. That offer is always going to win, but that's not always the case, because I always say, once the loan funds, it's cash at that point for the seller. So I don't think that's a huge thing, but it's just those two contingency dates that a seller's not putting at risk when they accept a cash offer, that is at risk when they do accept a financed offer.
Great. And so I think, we wanted to chat about different financing options, and we just wanted to touch on, we've touched on it before, but wanted to just kind of come back to this because we see this question a lot, and again, kind of leading into Kelsey and Karla's time in the webinar, but some questions about financing. Should I buy? Should I rent? Is there a way to make my financing more attractive to a seller? And then, of course, we're going to get into those lovely little challenges that we think, oh my gosh, there's no way we'll ever be able to buy a house coming out of a divorce or other situation that they'll be speaking to as well on yes, you can, or when you can.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. So to first jump in, let's talk a little bit about kind of some tools that we can utilize to really dial in and see what makes sense for you. I think that it's super important to look at the numbers. Obviously, purchasing a home is a very emotional thing. You need somewhere to live. It might be for your family, whatever that looks like, but it's also an investment. So we want to make sure, is this investment projected to be a good investment for you? So getting out of the rental market and into the home ownership realm can be a bit scary, I think, in recent times, mostly due to the cost of housing, where interest rates went. It can be a bit daunting and it can be very expensive. So it's important for us to also look at the numbers and see what financially makes sense over your period of time that you want to stay in the home, kind of depending on what your goals are. So one of the tools that I really love to use to help determine that is looking at a buying versus renting scenario. I think I have this on here where I can annotate. I'll have to have you guys tell me if you can see this or not when I start drawing. But the first thing in this, because this is very busy, that I want to talk about is looking at this net gain. So this is just going to look at what it's going to look like over a 9-year period. So I have this on a 9-year period, and it's showing right out of the gate, oh my goodness, you're going to come out almost $300,000 ahead by purchasing versus renting a home. But diving into that from looking at all sides of it, it's super important to look at what goes into that. So appreciation gain. Can you guys see what I'm drawing, by the way?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, perfect. I was worried about how I was going to do that with my screen sharing. So this is perfect. So appreciation gain. The beauty of appreciation gain is it doesn't matter if you put 3% down, 5% down, 50% down, your home, you get to gain appreciation based off of the value in the marketplace, which is awesome. So your down payment doesn't matter. You're going to gain appreciation no matter what. The amortization gain, this will obviously fluctuate based on rates. So every month that you make a monthly mortgage payment, you are paying down your loan balance. Obviously, with a higher interest rate, it takes a little bit, not longer period of time, but longer before you're paying more towards your principal balance. You might be paying more towards interest with that monthly payment, but you are still paying towards your principal loan balance. So you are going to gain in your amortization over that time period. And then one of the benefits of higher interest rates is that there is more of a tax benefit. So you can check that one off. That's really nice. There isn't as much of a tax benefit when there's lower interest rates with some of the tax changes that have come into play over the years. So one of the big perks to higher interest rates is that tax benefit. But looking at the red, the negatives, so cash flow difference, you're going to pay about $85,000 more in this scenario over this 9-year period by owning. So definitely going to cost more with your just monthly and annual cash flow. You're going to have some closing costs when you purchase a home. And then when you go to sell the home, there's going to be some costs associated with selling that home too. So we want to take all of that into account and looking at, okay, looking at all those positives, looking at all of those negatives, does this even make sense for you to purchase? So when we take that all into account, first of all, looking at this number, $421,000 just running off of rents for the county. I pulled this in Jefferson County, and the historical rental increases over the years and what that looks like. Over that 9-year period, paying $421,000 in rent. That's a bit of a heavy pill to swallow. So that right there is like, whoo, oh my goodness. But buying still going to be more expensive. That's that cash flow difference that we're talking about here. But factoring all of that in, you are still going to come out with an estimated almost $300,000 ahead by purchasing a home and paying towards that instead of paying towards rent, which I think is so cool to see and so interesting to see. So this scenario might not fit you and what you're looking to do, but we can dial this into your specific scenario and see if it does make sense. So I love these scenarios. If you want one, we can run one on you too. And the Lydia home team will help get that over to you.
Kelsey, what was the interest rate on this when you were
Oh,
looking them in?
thanks for saying that. Yeah. So I ran this at 7.5% because I wanted a not so pretty interest rate in there. So what this also isn't taking into account, and I'm glad you mentioned that, is that if interest rates come down, probably going to see interest rates come down in that 9-year period you would own the home. You refinance that, let's just say down to 5.5%, 5%, something like that, then this number grows that much more exponentially from that. So this was assuming a 7.5 interest rate for that entire 9-year period.
Right. So your rental total and your buying total could come closer together at that point.
Absolutely. Oh yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
also with the renting, you don't have any control over when that change might happen as far as your rental expenses, whereas you shouldn't have that issue with owning.
Absolutely.
Great.
Awesome. We can go on to there. Oh goodness. Now I have to figure out how to get all of that to go away. I guess I wasn't
an art class.
Yeah. There we go. Okay. I've never actually done that on a webinar, so I was playing with that as you guys were talking. Okay. So now let's look at this from a perspective of if you already own a home and you need to sell that home and then purchase in the same marketplace as well. So we want to make sure that you are prepared to do that by knowing how to leverage the equity in your home. Do you know how to do it in a way that can save you thousands through the process? And are you preparing yourself for a potentially heating up market as we head into the spring buying season? So we'll dive into each one of these a little bit deeper. Awesome. So there's a few ways that you can access the equity in your home. Obviously, you can sell first, or you can try to sell and go contingent on an offer, but that might not give you as strong of an offer in the marketplace if it's a little bit more competitive. Or if you sell first, you might need to move your family multiple times. You might need to rent a place in the meantime, put your stuff in storage, and maybe that's not really aligning with your goals. So the first option for accessing your equity is a bridge loan. And this is really meant to bridge the gap between selling your home and purchasing your next one. So the thing with bridge loans is they can get a little bit expensive. They typically carry a 1% fee with them. So you could be taking out a $500,000 bridge loan. That's going to come with a $5,000 fee plus some other closing costs associated with that, needing an appraisal on your departing residence, all of that sort of stuff. You can set these up with interest-only payments to help ease that payment load during this bridge time. And the nice thing about them is that you can loan against your assets. So this could be a really great option, but if you kind of prepare yourself earlier, we can talk about some other options that may be advantageous, or even if you maybe didn't prepare yourself earlier. Okay, so the first one is just a standard HELOC, which is a home equity line of credit. I honestly recommend that anybody who has a home, and probably if you've owned it for 2 years or more, that you should probably have a HELOC on your home. It is a line of credit, so it's similar to, let's say, a credit card where you only pay on what you're using. So you might have a credit line on your credit card of $20,000 doesn't mean you're paying interest on $20,000 or making payments on that. You're only paying on the amount that you're actually using. It's the same thing with a HELOC, but you're putting this line of credit on your home's equity instead. So that's why it's called a home equity line of credit. So most HELOCs, you can only put a HELOC on your home if you are living there as a primary resident. So that is your primary residence. There are some that will allow you to do it on like second homes and investment properties. But most of the time these have to be done before you'd even list your home or turn it into a rental or anything like that you might be looking to do. So that's why I always recommend it never hurts to just throw a HELOC on your house. Now, most of the time you can go up to 350,000 without even getting an appraisal, depending on your equity point in the home. Most HELOCs go up to about 450 to 500,000 on a standard HELOC. You cannot do this once the property is listed in most cases. We're going to talk about an exception here in a moment, but the nice thing about a HELOC, unlike a bridge loan, is that they are essentially free. Typically, if you just make a small draw on it at the time of closing, there's no closing fees or costs associated with pulling a HELOC unless you need that appraisal. That appraisal could be the one cost that you need. But this can be a much cheaper version. However, you have to do this ahead of time because HELOCs are not really meant to be used as bridge loans and short-term financing. So this has to be something that you're planning for ahead of time in most cases. But we'll talk next about one option that is actually really helpful. So we just recently got this one, but it's a true HELOC, so a home equity line of credit, but they do allow it on listed properties. So it follows some of the same stuff, but it actually goes to a much higher loan amount, and you are allowed to do it on a listed property. Now, the one caveat to this is because HELOCs they make their money based on you paying interest over time once you pull on your HELOC, is that if you pay it off within that first year, there's a $1,000 prepayment penalty. But that $1,000 can be a lot less, especially if you're pulling on a larger HELOC amount. So some people we've had where they've had to bridge the gap of they've had a ton of equity, they may own their home free and clear, and they maybe need to pull 800,000 out for their next purchase. So that could be an $8,000 fee on a bridge loan, and that can be closing costs, on top of that. Versus this one, there's going to be some closing costs, but instead of that $8,000 fee, it's now $1,000 prepayment penalty that you'll pay when you go to pay it off. So that right there is keeping another $7,000 in your pocket just from getting set up with the right kind of tool ahead of time. This one can go to a larger amount. In most cases, it's kind of similar to other HELOCs where it's essentially free if it's under 400,000, because you don't necessarily need an appraisal at that amount. This one's also really nice because you can do it on second homes and investment property. Now, the amount of equity you'll be able to pull, like your loan to the value of your home, is going to be lesser on some of these options, but it can be a really great tool to use. So it's just about figuring out what is it that meets your goals best? What are you looking to do? And really planning that ahead of time so that we can figure out the best solution for you.
Hey, Kelsey, what are you seeing as far as interest rates on HELOCs right now?
So HELOCs do follow the prime rate. So the prime rate right now is sitting around 8.5 to 8.75. And then there will be adjustments on top of that if you have like a lower credit score, if you are going to a higher loan to value. I'm seeing them anywhere, for most people, I'm seeing them between like 8.5 and 9.5% in most cases. And they are typically interest-only loans as well, or you can at least set them up as interest-only to help kind of ease that payment, especially if it's a more temporary thing or for qualifying for your next home.
Great, thanks.
Yeah. Awesome. So this slide, I didn't have anything on here because I just wanted to talk about a couple of different things. So the biggest thing, if you are in this position of buying, but you might need to sell first, or you think you need to sell first, or at some point you're going to need to sell, is get the process started early. Get with your team, get your team together as early as possible. So your lending team, your real estate team, and making sure that you feel really good about what that looks like, whether it be, having some comps run to figure out what you think you can get out of your home and what that net looks like to you. And then making sure that you're setting yourself up for the financing side on top of that. And also setting yourself up to be competitive in the marketplace. So like you heard Lydia and Sherry, I think they both actually mentioned this, was in a heating up market, sometimes going contingent on the sale of your home can be a disadvantage to you. So getting set up ahead of time can help keep you from being a contingent offer in the marketplace and help you to just be more competitive. Now, we also do have cash offer programs where you can be a cash buyer in the marketplace to also help you be competitive if you're looking to buy. So it's essentially leveraging your home to purchase your next home in cash as kind of a backup plan. But those are also really expensive programs. So they are great if they meet your goals. But another way that you can be competitive in the marketplace against cash offers is to just set yourself up ahead of time and be able to offer a 2-week closing. So we do a ton of 2-week closings, and that just helps you compete against a cash offer. That's about how quick a cash offer closes. So we can close you just as fast if we have you set up to do so ahead of time. And then you maybe don't have to go through the expensive route of being an actual cash buyer in the marketplace through leveraging the equity in your home. I already mentioned being non-contingent. Sometimes it's also, we're talking about all of this about in a heating up market, but sometimes it's also just about diving into your goals and figuring out what makes the most sense for you. So we recently had some buyers who, when they came to us, they said, we have to sell mom's home. It was a mother and daughter purchasing. We have to sell mom's home so that we can put the money down on the next home. But they had other down payment money available to them. And they qualified where they wanted to be just fine without selling. So what we were able to help them navigate and see is it may not be as much as they thought they were going to put down, but we talked about a long-term plan with that and how they could still put that much down and get their payment down a little bit through either a recast or a refinance. So we went into all of that, but we were able to get them under contract in a less competitive market as a buyer. They were able to get seller concessions to buy down their interest rate temporarily through a temporary buy down. And they're able to get moved out of their house so that they can stage it and put it up in the spring market and hopefully make more off of that home. Now, it doesn't always work out that perfectly, but sometimes it does. And sometimes it's just about, again, getting your team together so that you can figure out what options do you have and how can you make it work to meet your goals, but also be competitive in the marketplace.
Hey, Kelsey, just one thing to
Yeah.
add to, I mean, that's probably something that our team in particular specializes in, especially Jim. So like, for example, we had a lot of success with that last year as far as, somebody went to buy the house first, but their current home would sell for a much higher price if it was updated. And a lot of those updates are just so much easier to do when the home is empty.
Yes.
So that's something that we can definitely guide you through too. So if you're just like, I really do want to buy, but my house is in no shape to put it on the market, we have resources for that too. And
Yeah.
that's actually one of our biggest specialties. So
Yeah, your guys' team is incredible at that. So make sure you talk to them about that. And that, I mean, sometimes that just like extra preparation can make you tens of thousands of dollars more, and you need the right team behind you to do that. And this is the team to make that happen. So yeah, absolutely. All right, I'm handing it over to Karla to really dive into the divorce space when it comes to your home and home ownership.
Thank you. All right. So Kelsey and I are actually both certified divorce lending professionals. I have had my certification since 2017, and Kelsey has had hers for just over a year now. But we've worked together, and Kelsey's actually my daughter, for those of you that don't know. And she's been on my team for 5 years now. So she's seen all of these divorce transactions that we've worked through. And so she just finally went and got her certification to make it a little bit more legit. So we both spend a lot of time in this space. I actually spend about 100% of my time in this space. So I do a lot of education with realtors. I do a lot of collaboration nationwide with other CDLPs in my coaching group. And we also have a mastermind group and a Facebook group where we just share different scenarios that come up. And it's always shocking to me that at least once a week, there's a new scenario in there that, kind of stumps us, and we all kind of pile in and try to help each other out and see if we can figure out a solution for these divorcing clients. Because a lot of times, especially today with where the cost of housing is and where the interest rates are, it can be really, really difficult for our divorcing clients to remain in homeownership. And that's really our goal, is to keep them in homeownership and keep them in a decent loan, you know, even with where the rates and everything are. So next slide, please. So is it possible to purchase or refinance during the divorce prior to the final decree? It absolutely is, if you're amicable. So if you're not amicable, I don't even suggest going down this road. There's too much at stake. If it's not amicable, we really need to get permission from the attorneys and sometimes from an actual judge before any property can be sold or bought during the divorce. So the law in Colorado is once you file, you have to wait 90 days until you can finalize. But I'll tell you, in my experience, that's a very, very quick divorce. Most divorces take a lot longer than that. So I would say a typical divorce is 6 to 12 months. And some of that is just because they can't decide things. And the other part of it is, you know, maybe they're waiting in line with the courts because the courts are pretty backed up. But it can take a lot of time. And so my point here is, it's really hard on couples who are remaining in the home during this process. It's hard on the children, especially. So if the couple is amicable and we can get one of them moved, there's just a couple of things that we need to do. So first of all, the big thing is meeting qualifications. So do they qualify to actually purchase a new home? If we are at the point where they have filed and we can actually provide a court stamped separation agreement, there are some things that we can do with the allocation of the current mortgage payment or any of the other debt, like if they have car payments or credit cards or something like that, that's maybe stopping the person that's trying to purchase from buying from a qualifying standpoint. We can work with their attorneys or their mediators, and we can allocate that debt so that it doesn't count against the person that's trying to buy. And then they can find a different way to settle that during the divorce. So that one's really, really important. And it's important to know that all we need is to have this court stamped separation agreement, and then we can move that other person out. And the thing I want to mention too is that we do this all the time, and there's a lot of lenders that don't even know that anything like that is possible. They think we have to wait for final decree for them to move forward with any type of financing. So the second thing that we really have to meet is occupancy. So if it's really, really early on and the couple is not quite at the stage where they have completed a separation agreement, then typically the only way to really go about purchasing a new home would be to do it as an investment property. And so sometimes we can kind of, you know, we can help with the mediation or with the attorneys. We can help kind of push along that process a little bit, because if they're buying as an investment property, they have to put down more money and they have to take a higher interest rate. So it really would behoove them to kind of get their stuff together and get that separation agreement filled out and get it into the courts, because then we can just do everything above board. We can disclose that they are going through a divorce and that one person is moving out and they're going to be occupying this property. So the big deal there is that you can't own two primary residences at the same time. So if you try to write an offer on a new home and you're not saying anything about the divorce, and you're trying to buy it as an owner occupant because you are going to occupy the property, then the underwriter is going to go, are they getting a divorce? And then we have to go down the divorce road. So both of these have to be satisfied. And the key here is just get in touch early, start this process super early, as soon as you know that you're going to get a divorce, and we can put together financing options that can help either both of you or one of you into that new home. Sometimes the plan is to actually sell the marital home, but maybe one person is going to buy first and the other person is going to stay in that marital home until it sells before they purchase their home. So it's really helpful when we can work with both parties in the transaction so that we can find the best possible scenario for you both to come out whole in the end. Next slide. Okay, so accessing the equity in the marital home, So first of all, there's a lot of different ways that value is determined in the home. And you would want to access the equity for, like, if the one person that is keeping the marital home has to access that equity to pay off or buy out the other person. And so we're going to have to figure out what the value is. And I can tell you, people use all different kinds of valuations. So sometimes they'll use a market analysis from their realtor. I talked to 2 people today that are using their tax assessment. Some people use Zillow or Redfin. Some people use an appraiser, which is honestly what everybody should do. Everybody should have an appraiser come in and do this. And the honest truth is that nobody will know the actual or the exact value of your home unless you're going to sell. But I think the appraiser is your absolute best bet. That is what they do. That's their job. So my suggestion here is to always get an appraisal. So the different ways that you can access the equity in the home are, you can do a home equity line of credit. The reason that you might want to do that is if the person that is keeping the home they want to keep that low interest rate on the current mortgage that they have. So then they would probably want to just do a home equity line of credit so that they can pay out the money that's owed to the ex-spouse. The other option is to do a refinance as a buyout. And I'm going to talk about these next 2 kind of side by side. So you can refinance either as a buyout or as a cash out. But here's the deal. If you do it as a buyout, you benefit from a lower interest rate, and you can also pull out more money if needed. You can go all the way up to 95% of the value of your home if needed. So that's really the benefit of doing it as a buyout. But as a buyout, the only person that can get any money at all from that transaction is the person that you're paying off. So that has to go directly to your ex-spouse. It can't even funnel through your account. So that's the only way to accomplish a buyout. And it's really important to know and understand the difference here, because if your lender is not familiar with what a buyout is compared to a cash out, the cash out is going to come with a higher interest rate, and the highest you can go is to 80% of the value of your home. And so, like, for example, I have a client who told me the other day that her ex-husband can't pull enough cash out of his house to pay her what is owed. And so she was just going to take less. But my question was, so can he not pull it out because he doesn't qualify? Like, he doesn't make enough money to qualify for that much of loan? Or can he not pull it out because his lender doesn't understand that he's not capped out at 80% if he's doing it as a buyout? If he was doing it as a buyout just to pay her off, he should be able to take it all the way up, and there should be enough room in there to pay her out everything that's owed. So it's just really important that you know that there's a difference there, and that you're talking to the right lender that can help you there. And then obviously the last thing is to sell your home. And like I said, a lot of times this is where it ends up, because the people that are going through the divorce, they just really can't settle on a value, or maybe there's so much equity in the home because of what our values have done over the last few years, that the person that wants to keep the marital home can't afford to buy out the other person. Sometimes we can do it, like they can afford to do it in terms of we can get them qualified, but when they see what that payment looks like, and they realize that they can't have any fun and go on vacation anymore, then they decide maybe we should just sell, split the proceeds, and just each purchase a new home moving forward. Next slide. Okay, so assumable loans. This is a really big deal right now. And that is because everybody and their cousin and mother and brother did a refinance back in 2020, 2021, and 2022. So a lot of married couples that are going through divorces are holding really low interest rates, and they don't want to lose those. So there's a lot of questions around assumable loans. So I want you to know that if you're holding an FHA, and that is not, FHA does not stand for first time home buyer, it stands for Federal Housing Administration. So if you're holding an FHA loan or a VA loan, those absolutely are assumable loans. If you have a conventional loan, which honestly is what most people have, because when they did this refi, they probably refied into a conventional loan. So those loans are backed by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. So up until about maybe 6 or 7 months ago, I would have told you if you have a conventional loan, it's not assumable. Because right here, what's on the screen, this is a snapshot from a closing disclosure. That's what you signed at closing. And it clearly states that the loan that you refinance, the new loan that you took out, does not allow an assumption under the original terms. So what has changed, what we've noticed, what has changed, and our company is allowing it, is that a lot of lenders are allowing assumptions in the case of a divorce. So it's really important that you know the questions to ask when you call your current servicer. Your current servicer has to handle this assumption. So it's important that you know the proper questions to ask. And I've always offered to, like, I'm happy to get on the phone with you because I do know the questions to ask. And I know who I can, keep asking for. Like, maybe it's not the person that answers the phone because they might not actually know about assumptions or understand, or they might have just been told we don't do assumptions, but maybe they missed the part where it says in the case of a divorce. So maybe it just takes a little bit more digging. But what's really important to understand is that if you're going to assume a loan, you have to completely qualify. So you have to requalify for that loan. And you have to understand the time frame that it's going to take and make sure that when you are completing your separation agreement and you're agreeing to assume the loan, that you're allowing yourself enough time for this assumption to be completed, okay? Now, here's a scenario. If somebody, let's say that somebody needs child support or maintenance to help them qualify for the loan. Maybe they don't make quite enough at their job. And so they need this maintenance that's being paid by the other person. Well, we as lenders can't count that towards your income until you've received it on time for 6 months. So you can't apply for this assumption until after your 6 months of receiving that. And then here's the scary thing. It takes about 6 months to get your loan assumed. So you can't agree that you're going to have your ex-spouse removed from the loan by use of an assumption within 180 days after divorce, because it's not going to happen. It would be rare that that would even happen, even if you don't need the income from the other person. But this, again, this is why it is crucial that you speak with a lender before you finalize the divorce and before you agree to something that you can't actually deliver after your divorce is final. Because I wouldn't say most, but a lot of divorces are not amicable, and people don't want to go back to the table and renegotiate and modify any of the separation agreement once they've already come to terms and they finalized it. So some divorces are just that nasty that they won't go back to the table. Next slide. Okay, so the division of debt. This is important. It's important that the verbiage in your separation agreement is correct and that the debt is allocated properly so that it is not counted against the person that we're trying to work with to qualify. So a perfect example is, let's say in the separation agreement, let's just use Sally and Bob as the married couple. And let's say that Sally is going to keep the home and Bob is moving out. And Bob's a super nice guy. And he said, Sally, you don't even have to assume the loan. I'm going to let you stay on it. It's at a 2.5% interest rate. And I know that you'll be able to take care of the house and take care of the kids if I leave you with that nice low interest rate. So Sally continues paying at that 2.5% interest rate. And now Bob wants to buy a new house. And here's the thing. As long as the separation agreement states that the home and the mortgage has been awarded to Sally, we won't count that mortgage against Bob when he's trying to qualify for his new home. So here again, this is another thing that most lenders don't know. Most lenders will tell you that they have to see proof that Sally has made that payment on her own for 12 months before they won't count it against Bob. Not true. From day one, as soon as that separation agreement is court stamped and it says that Sally is responsible for that mortgage, we won't count that mortgage payment against Bob. So Bob can move on and he can purchase a new home. We can do that with anything. You can do it with credit card debt, auto loans, student loans, anything that's showing up on the credit report, you can allocate to one person or the other so that we don't have to count it against them. Next slide. All right, so employment and qualifying income. I had a very long conversation today with a woman who's going through divorce, and she currently is only part-time employed. This is one of the biggest struggles that we run into. And I will say, honestly, it's primarily with women, and that's because we carry babies and we end up staying home at one point or another, and we end up having a big job gap. And then when the kids maybe start going back to school, then we start going back to work part-time. So this is often the woman just simply for that reason alone. And so what happens then is they go into part-time employment, and then they get hit with a divorce, wherever it comes from. The divorce comes up, and they're not in the headspace. They're not in the headspace to go back to a full-time job. I actually talked to 2 women today in this exact situation. Ideally, they will go back to a career, they will go back to full-time employment, but that's not where they're at right now. And so just coaching them through that and helping them know what kind of employment they need to seek out so that they will qualify for a mortgage moving forward. Now, they might be keeping the marital home, or they might be moving on to purchase a new home, but we want to help them plan and make sure that they're accepting the proper job moving forward. Like one of the women I talked to today, she works part-time as a CNA, and she was going to get another part-time job. And I said, well, if you do that, we're going to have to wait 2 years so that we can use that part-time employment. We have to use a 2-year average. I said, so instead of working 2 part-time jobs, how about if you just find a full-time job, right? And so we kind of talked about what does that look like, and what are the possibilities that she could look at for full-time employment. So it's really important that they know before they are out seeking new employment that they're seeking the right employment if this is what they want to do, is to qualify for a mortgage. So qualifying income. So income and employment they're different, right? So the employment is just, we have to show consistent employment or different types of employment, like depending on the loan that we use. But the income is really, really important. So we might have somebody that is, let's say that they have self-employment. That was also something that came up today. The problem is that, again, we need 2 years of self-employment. This woman had just started her self-employment in 2023, and she hadn't really made any money. And my experience with that, with self-employment, is that it often takes 3, 4, even 5 years to show enough money on the self-employment for us to use it as any qualifying income. So our goal with helping these divorcing clients is to make sure that the income that we are using qualifies them for a good mortgage. We have different mortgage options out there for people. Like we have bank statement loans, we have all these different kinds of crazy loans that if you have a pile of cash, we can probably fit you into these different loan types. But the problem is that they come with higher interest rates. So if the rates today are sitting around 6.5 or 7 for a regular loan, you can imagine where the rates are for these crazy loans. They're like up in 9 or 10%. If that's your only option, we'll put you there, right? If that's your only option and you want the house that bad, we'll put you in that. But often if we have time to work with you, we can get you set up to qualify for a regular loan that's sitting around 6.5 or 7%. Kelsey, is there anything that you wanted to add to the employment and income? I feel like you kind of jump in and help me there sometimes because I forget things.
No, it's just about talking with a CDLP ahead of time, especially if there's going to be alimony or child support, because you have to, as Karla mentioned, have received it for so long. It also has to continue for so long after closing in order for us to even use any of that income to qualify. So we don't need to, just because of the sake of time, because we have to finish this up, but we won't dive into all the specifics of that, but it's just important that you talk to a CDLP about that to make sure you're actually set up properly. We have one person who they're missing it by 1 month, and that they can't qualify based off of that 1 month for a traditional loan. So sometimes when we are involved early, we can get you set up correctly.
And what we mean by missing it by 1 month is her continuance is short. it's short 1 month of the 3-year requirement, literally 1 month, because of where her daughter's birthday falls. So super, super important that we have all of this figured out and dialed in. Next slide. Okay, real quick. I think this might be the last, but so some common mistakes that are made during the divorce process and after divorce that can really impact the home ownership. And this usually happens, guys, when people are really amicable because they get really, really loose with their finances. So paying bills in lieu of paying maintenance or support. For example, I had a guy who was paying for his children's private school, and he was deducting that from his support payment that he was paying to his ex-wife. And therefore, when we went to qualify her, we could not use the full amount that she was awarded. We could only use the amount that he was being paid, and we had to write a bunch of letters and this, and that. So the maintenance or support needs to be paid to the ex, and then the ex can pay for school or whatever it is, but the full amount needs to be paid. Maintenance awarded but not useful due to time period. That's kind of what Kelsey just explained. So debt not allocated properly and support paid to or from a joint account. Really, really important. When people are very amicable, they leave open joint accounts, and that's how they funnel money back and forth. And it doesn't work for our underwriters. Our underwriters have to see that it comes from an individual account to another individual account. Otherwise, we're not able to use it. I think we might be at the end.
I think we are.
Woo! Anyway, the bottom line is gosh, if you're going through a divorce, call us as soon as possible, so that we can help set you up for success through the process.
As well as any of the other situations that we talked about too. So
Yes.
getting that team together early, so. All right, well, you guys all took in a lot of information. Just wanted to give it a couple minutes in case people have any questions.
Okay.
That was great information, Kelsey, Karla, as always.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much for having us on.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, you guys all had really great info too. All of that is very important.
It's important jumping into the spring market, I think, knowing what to expect, you know, or what could happen.
Absolutely. One thing Karla points out is there is just a lot to the divorce space when you're thinking ahead. And so again, getting someone that really knows the lending side of divorce, because it can be tricky, is important. And I'm certified in real estate divorce and have used Karla as my go-to for a long time. She's amazing. Kelsey is amazing. So if you have any questions about that specifically, they're phenomenal.
Well, and you have 2 certifications in divorce, so that's good.
Yeah. Thank you, Sherry. That was very kind of you.
And some of us have been divorced, so you know.
That's another certification.
Yes, that was my big certification. I guess I have 3. Doesn't look like we've got any questions.
All right, well, obviously we are super happy to go through any of the scenarios that we talked about one-on-one individually with you guys. So your situation may be one of these that we talked about, or might be slightly different. But we definitely are happy to chat with you one-on-one about that. And then also we'd love to send you a buyer's guide, just telling you giving you a summary of what we talked about and also the ways that we can help you in this process. So if you're interested in that, we'll go ahead and send that out to you. So just let us know. And we're always here to help with any questions along the way. So it doesn't have to be tonight or tomorrow, just anytime you can reach out to any one of us. So does anybody else have any other closing comments?
No.
So, awesome. Well, thank you everyone for being a part of this, and we will keep you posted on our next webinar, and thank you for joining.
Thank you.
Thanks. Good night.